Hello and welcome to Guerrilla Discipleship. I'm Tim Parker, and this over here on one side of me is my brother-in-law, David Laser, and we want to just continue to encourage you on how to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples, right? That's what this Guerrilla Discipleship podcast is all about. For the past couple of weeks, I think we're on week 3 now, we've been looking at barriers to disciple making and some of the biggest ones. Week 1, if you haven't watched that, go ahead and maybe catch up on it. It was the fact that oftentimes we are just too self-centered. That one hurts a little bit, but I think it's true that we cared more about ourselves and maybe we probably should, or care about ourselves more than we care about honoring God. Last week, we talked about the fear, and particularly the fear of rejection. Many of us would probably say fear is the number one barrier. And today we're going to talk about another big barrier that we hear from a lot of people. It's a particularly issue where I currently live outside the DC area, but I don't think it's only a problem for people who live in a metropolitan area. I think it is the same is true for people who live even in slightly more agrarian or rural societies. And that is, we are too busy, or at least that's what we claim. We have this barrier of being too busy. I do not have enough time on my hands to do X, Y, and Z, whether it's working, whether it's family, whether it's physical health or mental health, or taking care of parents or taking care of kids, right? We all seemingly have all the same amount of time, but yet we all seemingly figure out how to fill up that time, whether we're in high school, college, or even retired or working. We seemingly all fill up the hours of our day the same because I can't make disciples, Tim and David or Pastor Kevin, right? Because I'm too busy. We've heard that tons and tons of times. So I want to share a story that I think kind of will help set this off and maybe put this in perspective, because I don't think I have to do much to convince you of the issue, but hopefully I can help convince you of the solution as well with this. So I'll start off with this. So I'm thinking way back, not too long ago, but long enough ago. I was in graduate school. That's where pastors go to seminary. I was taking about 15 credits a semester, which for grad school is considered outrageous, especially for seminary. I was newly married. I was living in a new state. I had over an hour in a city to commute to seminary. I had 2 dogs I was taking care of, and I was working 3/4 time at a church, which is code word for you work full time, but we pay you 3/4 time. Right. And so at that point in time, I would have said I was too busy to do anything except take care of family, animals, church people, do church stuff, and graduate school. And so one thing that happened is that I started neglecting my dental health. So I know a lot of you will think this is kind of funny, but maybe not, because of the my dentist at the time, I was having some issues orally and things like that. And I finally went to the dentist after years of neglect because I was just quote unquote too busy. And they said I had gingivitis, not ginger, like red hair vitis, but like gingivitis, like the inflammation of the gums and stuff. And I was kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever, not that big a deal. I'll come back like in a year or two. And I haven't been in like 4 or 5 years. And I was just too busy with everything going on. I couldn't come. And the dentist more or less was like, I don't think you should do that. And I'm like, yeah, of course you don't. You just want my money. And he's like, no. Like, do you realize that your dental health does affect your reproductive health? And I looked at him and he looked at me. He's like, yeah, sometimes people have problems having issues to conceive because gingivitis can actually affect other things below the belt. And I was like, what? And so I realized that at that point in time, it was no longer feasible or wise for me to neglect my oral or physical health, because it was going to then affect other things down the road, not only like not having teeth and miscolored teeth and bad breath, but potential to have future offspring. And I kind of think that this perfectly dovetails in. And you're probably like, where is he going with this? Because I think a lot of times we say we're too busy to take care of our spiritual health, and that we don't have enough time in the day to be spiritually healthy. And I think when we say that, there's no wonder why we don't have time to go and make disciples, because we then are not our reproductive health in regards to disciple making, as being a disciple who makes disciples who make disciples, is affected because our spiritual health is. And I want to challenge you. I want to push back, and then I'll hand this over to David a little bit and say, I think what I write down here, that when you're too busy not to take care of your spiritual health, and you're too busy not to take care of your health for the future of others. By neglecting it, you're not helping yourself, and you're not helping others who don't know who Jesus is and who maybe don't have a lot of time left here on earth. And so I encourage you to say that we need to prioritize our physical health before it gets bad. you need to prioritize your spiritual health and sharing your faith before it becomes to a place where it's, I don't want to say dead, but maybe on hospice or palliative care. So David, I don't know if you want to talk about being busy, if you want to take that analogy further. I know we have tons of stuff to talk about, but that's kind of the area I want to lean into today, because we all say, I'm just too busy. And I'm like, you can. And then if you wait, it's going to have long-term effects, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, the irony was I was late hopping on Zoom with you today, like 8 minutes late, I think, because I'm too busy, right? So we all feel this. Something about the modern world, especially. I don't know all the factors that contribute, but I certainly think our constant connection in the technological age, like, totally has an effect on this, where we not only are busy, but like we feel busy. You know what I mean? And so we're just swimming around in this world of like rush and hurry and constantly connected. I think we touched on this a few times already, but I just think it's helpful for me as I look at my life and think through other people's lives, like looking at the layers of this and saying, we're talking about a lifestyle thing when it comes to being too busy, but like underneath that is a heart thing, a priority thing. And underneath that is like something you believe about yourself or about God. And I feel like the root belief here for followers of Jesus is like, what is our time? Like what is what's the biblical view of time for followers of Jesus, right? Like we think it's my time. And it's like, once you say yes to Jesus, it's not really just my time. It's like that's, we could call it stewardship. My life, right? My life is no longer my own. But then there's a second part of that is not only do we sort of think or act like we think it's my time, but maybe deep down we don't trust that like having everything truly in God's hands would be a good thing. Like it's a control thing. Like it's like, well, if I give up my life, my schedule, my time to Jesus, think of all the things I'm going to lose. And it's like, wait, like he's good. Like he's really, really good. Like go to that verse in Matthew where he says, come to me, all you are weary, and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. Like he knows how to do your life better than you do. But deep down underneath our lifestyle habits and our priorities, like we maybe don't fully believe that. Right?
It's definitely a control issue. Keep going. And I just want to affirm it is definitely a control issue.
We all have that.
Yeah. Is God good? And if I do this, what do I have to give up in order to have more time with God? And I think maybe there is things we do need to give up, but I want you to speak to this more, David, because you had said something earlier about redeeming the time. Maybe there's more, not as much as what do I have to give up, but how do I fuse it together? How do I reprioritize? How do I make my everyday life more about disciple making and more about giving it to God? What I'm already doing, at least what I'm already doing that's, not destructive or
something. Yeah. There's no question. You got to give that up. But plenty of things. It's kind of, hey, what do I do with this? One thing we spoke to this already, I think too, but this idea of the way my world the way culture forms me, and then kind of getting some counter formation to rewire the way I think and live according to the kingdom of God. And one of these principles that to me seems pretty clear in the way of the kingdom is like, it seems like a lot of times with God, less is more. And like we're called to give up something, but we actually kind of gain a lot from it. We think we need that 7-day work week, but God is like, you could actually do a lot more with 6. Mm-hmm. We think we need all the money in the bank that we get for all the bills, but he'd say, if you would take this step of faith with this tithing thing and give up some, it would. Less is more with God. By laying something down, we get something back. By losing our life, we're gaining it. And that principle applies, I think, with time, that we need to think about, with our world, more is more. With God, less is more. Simplicity is really awesome. If we'd be willing to take that journey and apply it, whether it's the principle of Sabbath or, there's so much in there. We could spend a whole series talking about this stuff, but Yeah.
I'll go to a slightly area more about the problem, and then we can go to the solution if you'd like. But
Yes.
I have written down here.
You tried to pass it over me to get to that transition, but I
No. We can sit here as long as we want. We don't need to. We can go for 40 minutes if we like. People who are watching might not want, but
we might not have enough time.
I'm gonna take a step back, and I kind of want to challenge this as well. In my notes here, it more or less says if you're not willing to use your time to honor God, and whether it's not just devotional life, but being spiritually obvious and being willing to step into those conversations that we have with strangers or family members or family gatherings or friends, because I encourage disciple making is actually better in relationship. It's better with people you already have time with. So it's not creating new things. It's just using what you're doing better. And the question is that I have written down here is, what are you communicating to Jesus when you're saying your things and your mission is more important than his?
Yes.
You don't have to answer that question because I think we know the answer, but what are you communicating when he's like, God, I know you have a plan. I know you have an agenda, and I know intellectually I want to follow that, and I have good intentions to, but, right? And then when you say the word but, everything in front of it's tendency negated. But, right? But what are we communicating when we're like, but I think it's all good in theory, but in practice, I'm not going to do it. I think we're communicating something that we probably don't really want to communicate to God. And if we understood him as more of a person, which he is, maybe we would be like, wow, it's like kind of saying, I would love to spend more time with you, honey, working on our marriage, but I'm too busy fill in the blank. It's like, well, are you not too busy to not focus on your marriage? Because if your marriage is important to you, hopefully you're going to do the work it requires. And while we're not married to God, we do have an intimate relationship with him, or at least we ought to.
Yes.
So
we have a covenant with him.
Yeah.
I want to share a quick story. It's not a personal story. I just heard it in another podcast. This was dealing with family relationships and dealing with maybe wounds from your past. But this guy talked about having some wounds from his father, from his upbringing, and had a stable home, hardworking parents. Life was good, but dad was so busy working. Basically, this child experienced neglect, right? Because dad was always working, right? And so kid gets home from school, little boy, and dad's always in the office working, the door shut, and the boy would just sit outside the office door and write little notes, draw pictures, and slip them under the door, right? And here's this grown man now processing what he experienced as a child, and you can imagine, just cuts you to the heart. He's like, I just wish one time he would have sent the note back. He would have given me something back, right? And I just want to apply this to this conversation with time, with priorities. Well, some of this can apply to your relationships with him, right? Because God might be saying you are not investing in the most important relationships of your life, right? But what's the most important relationship? What is God doing? Slipping those messages to us, and we're just like, man, I'm too busy to send anything back.
No, I think it's both ways. It's investing in our God relationship with God upward, but it's also people are, whether we realize or not, slipping us notes under the door, signs of I need help, I need hope, I need healing. And we're sometimes going, yes, you're a friend. Yes, you're a family member. Maybe you're an acquaintance. And we're not either reading the notes or we read them and go, well, that stinks. Or I feel bad for them. Right? Someone online maybe posts man, I'm just really going through a hard time. I've been having some really bad thoughts, and I'm dealing with this, or I've lost a parent. And you scroll on your phone and go, oh, that sucks.
They slip under the door and you don't do anything about it.
Maybe they're knocking on the door, and that's a knock on the door, right? And then maybe we go, that sucks. Maybe you go, well, I should say something. I heart it. Or maybe thoughts and prayers. But what if instead of that scrolling, or maybe even turn to your spouse and go, honey, do you see this? This is horrible. What if instead of just liking or ignoring it or commenting thoughts and prayers, we actually sent them a message like, hey, I saw you posted something. Would you want to talk? Even if it's someone from high school who used to bully you, that's someone knocking on your door, I think. I mean, it's not the same way as someone knocking on your door physically, but this is a digital knock. We're living in a digital society. And so are we too busy to stick our foot in a door that's opened up? Because this person's obviously hurting. And I think we have to realize that there are people who are sending messages constantly. And are we being aware enough? Or are we so focused on our agendas?
They might be the people that live in our very own home, and we're missing those messages. They might be strangers, they might be acquaintances, but they're all around us. And I'm just going to say this and call it like it is. Our society is self-sabotaging because of our pace of life. We are sabotaging our own lives. We are sabotaging our own families because of our pace of life. If it hurts, let it hurt, because
That's good. That's a good word.
We see it. We are overloading in a pace of life with no margin or ability to be present in the situations that come most. And because we don't have margin, we're not able to handle the little unexpected, unplanned sorts of things. It affects everything. And what I love about the guerrilla discipleship thing is it's really, it's deep diving us into reconciling our lifestyles with what we say we believe about Jesus and what he's calling us to something so much more. And it's always a work in progress. We're not trying to load pressure on people. We're not trying to load guilt on people. We're trying to say, Jesus is inviting us to a better way. And that's a nice transition to the solution.
That's a nice segue to the solution, because you perfectly talked about 2 or 3 words
right now
that I want to talk about. And I think a solution is this. There's a really good book David and I recommend, and I'm hoping that in the email that gets sent out or in the bio or whatever, that it will also be posted and shared. I can't say enough about John Mark Comer's. He and I both unironically have the same book next to us in arm's reach at the same time. We did not plan that. Called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, a pastor. It's not as much about disciple making as much as it is about being made into an apprentice of Jesus. But there's some still good stuff in there we can apply for this.
Very much applies.
One of the key parts that we'll dig into as part of the solution, and then we'll get right 1 or 2 things, we'll wrap it up, is that we need to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. And a lot of times we read biographies and we want to adopt, like, if Benjamin Franklin was early to bed, early to rise, made him healthy, wealthy, and wise, we said, well, maybe I should be like Ben Franklin. But then the Bible's the only book we read and we go, oh, look at Jesus. Look at all the things he said. But then we don't actually adopt anything he did or his style. And so if you look at Jesus' ministry, I'm just going to pull out one small area. I think it's even in the book of Mark. I could be mistaken, but where Jesus is like interrupted, like verse after verse after verse after verse. And he was okay. He let himself be interrupted. I think of the passage, I believe it was, he was going to heal, I think it's Jairus' daughter, who was deathly sick. And he's on his way.
And then there's the issue of blood.
Right. And then there's a lady there who's been bleeding for forever. Right. Not for forever, but you know what I mean? And she pulls on him and he stops in the crowd. He talks, has a conversation with her, heals her. He's willing to be interrupted, even though this girl is probably going to die. When that's all over with, people go, well, Jesus, I guess you didn't really care about the little girl, because in the meantime, you've been having this conversation. That girl across the street's died. And people go, oh, look, Jesus doesn't care. And then he's like, no, I can be interrupted, and goes and heals and raises that girl from the dead. And I think that we look at that and go, well, isn't that nice? We should be healing. We should be forgiving. We should loving people. But we don't look at it and go, wow, we should be interruptible. Wow, we should create margin. Wow, we should be able to be, have the same heart for the same people Jesus has a heart for. And so I know I'm like rambling, but I think that's the biggest thing is if we want to get rid of this, the solution to hurry so we can make disciples, we need to become like Jesus. And in particular, we need to have the same heart and the same margin and the same interruptibility as him. And then we will be able to interact with the people who are slipping the little notes under our door. And so, I'll I don't know if David, you want to talk about that or go someplace else with it, but that's definitely something that's in the book, but also something I think is crucial to disciple making in general.
That's good. I think that'd be great. I think it'd be a great little exercise for people if they have a little more commute time after this or whatever you're doing. You have some time later, whether you have a journal or you just want to think through it mentally or talk to a friend, spouse about it, whatever. But like, why don't you think through like the last couple of times you were interrupted, and then kind of do a little autopsy of that experience and say, how did I handle that? How did I deal with that? Right. And it's not to say that there's not plenty to be said about having good boundaries and knowing how to structure your time in a really wise way, that there are times to know that the interruption is not your calling. Like you're actually not appointed to deal with that, but having the discernment, but in a general sense, just being interruptible. What did I do with those interruptions?
And if you never have interruption, that's a bad thing because it means you're not interruptible.
Exactly.
And were you upset? Were you angry? Because I found out that oftentimes in my own life, God speaks stronger to me and through me in my interruptions than in my normal scheme, because my plan is this, and God interrupts me for the sole purpose of getting my attention. Because otherwise I'd be so focused on an agenda or a person that God's like, no, Tim, I don't want you to focus on that guy. I want you to focus on that one. And so I'm going to literally have this guy drop a weight on your foot so that you can
Yeah.
because I've been trying to. I mean,
That's awesome.
that hasn't happened yet, but something almost like that has.
I was gonna say, is that what you got some ice for?
No, I got ice for something else today, but yeah.
And I want to hit this little thing about hurry and exhaustion. This is sort of a solution oriented thing. Little nugget here for folks. I heard another story about, I guess, some poet named David White. Doesn't matter. You can look up the story, but he was like burnt out. He was like serving with a nonprofit and doing the classic, just totally like burnt out by trying to help others. And he was meeting with like a monk to just hang out and talk, because that's what you do, right? You just meet with monks and hang out. But he asked this person, like, dude, I need to talk about exhaustion. Like, tell me about exhaustion. What do I do with this? And the response of this follower of Jesus was, the antidote to exhaustion isn't necessarily rest. It's wholeheartedness. And so I think we need to, when we talk about time, exhaustion, hurry, sometimes rest is needed and rhythm, Sabbath. Yep. But there might be something deeper too. The reason that you always feel busy and hurried, even when you're not, is there's something in our heart that needs addressed with the Lord. Like wholeheartedness will get you a lot farther than just.
Is there a hole you're trying to fulfill?
Planned, rigid schedule.
Yeah, and I kind of look at that as, is there a plan you're trying to fulfill because there's a hole in your heart, or are you not being wholehearted in every situation you find yourself in, so you're never fully invested, and so your attention's split?
Exactly. So there you go.
I want to say this, and maybe tell a little story, and then Dave, if you want to wrap it up, we can. Because we are getting not close to our time, but we're trying to be honoring the normal time frame of discussion. Very clearly, I wrote my notes. I'm not sure if David said it, or if I said it, or if we stole it from someone, but it doesn't matter. We put, quote unquote, the solution isn't more time. So it's like, if I just had more time, the solution is not more time. So if you're saying, God, give me more time, we all have 23 hours, 58 minutes, and some odd seconds in a day. It's not actually 24 hours. Fun fact. But God has given us each the same hours in a day, just under 24 hours. And so it's what you do with that time. So I want to encourage you to pray about what you maybe need to reprioritize, but also how you can use it wisely. I was telling David before we started about I very rarely get off of our church's campus. In fact, I would probably embarrassed to admit that the only time that I do go off is to either go shopping with my wife, go to a doctor's visit, because physical health and dental health is important, or probably to meet with another family or another couple or another person across the street at Starbucks or at a restaurant downtown, which is like a mile away, right? So I very rarely get off, except for I have carved out in my schedule twice a week. I'd love for it to be 3, but it hasn't got there yet. An hour and a half on Mondays and an hour and a half on Thursdays to go to the gym. And it's literally probably the only times I have strategic, intentional, regular interactions with people in the community who do not know Jesus or do not have it connected to our church or anything like that. And so I have been praying for forever now, God, use the most of these 3 hours. It's literally the only 3 hours I get to go out in the world. And I can tell you dozens of stories now of how God has continued to redeem those hours in the gym. Amen. Sometimes my workouts aren't always as long as I like to be. Sometimes it's a 15-minute conversation with someone who comes up to me who I'm growing a relationship with. Sometimes it's non-interruptions at all. Sometimes I interrupt people. But now, since I've been praying and developing relationships, and most of the time people come and interrupt me.
Yes. You'll get interrupted more and more. Beautiful thing.
So I'm going to challenge everyone.
Sacrifice some reps.
Yeah, sacrifice some reps. At the end of the day, God, you can miraculously shed the pounds and create the muscle if you really want. If that's really the goal of this all. Maybe it's not. But I want to encourage you all. I know most of us probably aren't working 40 plus hours at a church. Most of us probably don't live on a church campus, and most of us probably aren't completely leaving a church property or something like that. Like as little as I oftenly do. But I do know that we all have probably way more than 3 hours that we're engaging with the lost or the secular world or people who don't know Jesus. And so I would encourage you, if you could just also pray for 3 or more hours each week, if you even where you could at least be spiritually obvious, or God, help me to use the time that I'm already at work or already traveling or already on the subway to do this. And Lord, help me, right? And see what God will do and how he'll show up.
It's so good. Yeah. Redeem the time. Like get that get that phrase into your vocabulary, get that phrase into your thinking, because I think most people hear this conversation, they go right to like, what do I need to chop out? What do I need to change? What do I need to cut out? And that's fine. Some of that is good to think through.
You don't need 14 hours of screen time a day.
Yeah, there are some things you can cut out, folks. There are some things I can cut out, right? But right alongside that, and maybe even more importantly, and you can practice this right away, is just redeem the time. How do you use that commute to take your kids to the sports practice or to the game where it's like, hey, let's stop and let's pray about this game, that you can just play your best and honor God with the way you conduct yourself and how you interact with your friends. Let's pray that, in the stands, I can talk to some people and we can have some spiritually obvious conversations, redeem that commute, redeem that car ride, redeem that game. There's just endless possibilities. And then it makes your life so full of purpose and adventure. And there's risks. And then that risk comes with adventure. And with
we already talked about the rejection, so we can't fear rejection anymore. We already fixed that.
We got over the self-centeredness.
Yeah.
You're good to go. Yeah, that's cool. Redeem the time.
Well, thanks, David. I think our time is about up of how we normally like to be. We'll love to see you next time. We have another big barrier we're going to go over, but if you ever have any questions or comments or concerns, feel free to email me at tparker@oakdale.church. And we're just grateful that you joined in, and we hope that you comment, share this discussion. We hope that it can be encouraging to you and to someone else. So go ahead and do that. It's just as important to take it in as it is to send it out. All right. Have a good day, and God bless.
Bye, everybody.